Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Suffering from change fatigue? Try changing from the inside out with our guest, Erika Andersen. Andersen and Erika, thank you for being here today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm thrilled to be here.
I told you before the show, I love this book, Change from the Inside Out. It alerted me to so many things and why I like change, why I don't, why I fear it, etc. So I hope we can help our audience as much as the book has already helped me.
Oh, great.
You start off with chapter 1, and I think the title is How Change Has Changed. Now, is that really true? I mean, that seems like something that would kind of be the same, an apple is an apple type of thing. Explain what you mean by that.
It's absolutely true. And let me take one step back to talk about why I wrote this book in the first place. So when I write a book, so this is my 5th book, and when I write a book, it's always because I get curious about something. And so my company, Proteus, has had a change practice for over a decade, and I think we're very good at helping organizations move through change. But I started to wonder why change is so hard for us. That's one question I wanted to answer. And then I also got curious about, okay, so change is hard, but when we go through a change, what actually happens inside of us mentally and emotionally? So I started thinking about why change is hard. And I always look at history, we are the result of history. And so I thought, okay, any person who was alive 100 or 200 or 500 years ago, their life from beginning to end was pretty stable. Like if you were born 150 years ago in the United States, let's say, you almost certainly grew up where your parents grew up. You probably did the work that your dad did. If you were a man, you probably ate the same food and went to the same church and lived in the same village for your whole life. Lives in the past were, from our point of view, kind of unimaginably stable. And when a change came, it was generally speaking a threat and a danger. It was a war or a famine or a plague or an earthquake, right? And so almost without exception, in the old days, the safest bet was to come back to the known, was to come back to that stable life, that predictable life. So that's what life has been for thousands of years. So we're all deeply wired to think life stays the same. When it changes, it's bad, and we should come back to the norm. So then starting in the beginning of the 20th century, that started to change. And the story I use, as you know, at the beginning of the book about how change has changed is when I was a kid, I'm old enough that TV was a new thing. And we got a TV when I was a little kid.
Me too.
And right?
Yep.
And then you remember 10 years later, we got color TV. So that was the pace of change 60 or 70 years ago. A big technological innovation like that took 10 years. Now that level of innovation probably happens on my cell phone every 15 minutes, right? So even since then, in that 50 years ago, now that level of change is happening daily. So this is not what human beings are used to. So of course, change is hard for us. We're wired to think of it as bad, as dangerous. So we now have to rewire ourselves to feel comfortable in this state of nonstop change that we all have to live in all the time.
So that's not just some words to catch our interest when you say change has changed. It really has.
It really has. And if you think about your whole life, even if you're only 30, but if you're old like us in your 60s and 70s, change is so much faster now than it ever was. Part of that is the internet. Part of that is other kinds of technology. But just every day, changes happen that we probably have more change in a day of our lives than our ancestors 200 years ago had in their whole lives.
And I felt great reading that because it wasn't that I've slowed up. It's just that change got faster. So it made me feel great and much younger. So that's a win-win. And of course, Erika, you point out, I think in your book that during this time, in the last few years, 1/3 of the manufacturing jobs have disappeared in the country. And the knowledge and service jobs have actually doubled over that time.
Yes. I mean, those are just great indications of, and think of, as a result of that, all the companies that either no longer exist or have changed unmanageably. And the largest companies in the world, Google, Amazon, Facebook, didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, this is new.
It's so amazing, and I think it's enlightening. It was to me, and I loved reading this. It was like a mystery book at first, meaning that it held my interest, and I couldn't wait to find out who the next character was going to be coming up, et cetera, et cetera. You actually have, and I think you mentioned it, but just so our audience knows how important this is, you have a company, it's called Proteus, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you actually go to companies and major companies, and you teach them how to change.
Precisely.
That again, it amazes me because this seems like some of our basic things in life, and yet because it's so fast and difficult for us because of the rapidity, I guess, of it, this is making you a wonderful entrepreneur.
Oh, we are very helpful to our clients, and if you think about just even how change at companies has changed, I know like 30 years ago there was what was called at the time a reorg. So this would happen about every 5 years, where they'd pick the company up and shake it around and set it back down, and it was different. And then, oh, thank God, that's it for the next 4 or 5 years. Now that level of reorganization is happening continuously, and companies just have to get better at it. And so then the other thing that as I said, that I was trying to figure out is not only why is change hard for us, but then how do we actually go through it? And this is really why the book is called Change from the Inside Out, that we discovered this wonderful, useful thing that we came to call the change arc, which is how a person actually goes through a change. And the first thing, and you pointed this out before we started recording, the first thing we noticed is that when a change comes at us, we almost always want to know 3 things. We want to know, what does this mean for me? Why is this happening? And what will it look like when it's done, right?
Exactly.
Those are the
perfect. Yes.
Critical pieces of information that we want to know when a change comes at us. And then we realize that because we have this history as humans of thinking that change is bad, even as we're asking these questions, we have this negative mindset. We think, as we're asking these questions, this change is going to be difficult and costly and weird. And difficult means I don't know how to do it, and other people are going to make it hard to do. Costly means it's going to take from me things I value, which might be time or money, but it might be identity and reputation and power and relationships, right? So it's going to take away from me things that I want. And weird just means weird. It means strange. It's like, this isn't how we do things around here.
You know, that's so I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's so true. While you're saying that, I'm just thinking, if someone loses their job, something major, well,
yes.
It took away their identity. They're a plumber, they're an accountant, a teacher, a writer, whatever they might do. It puts them in a strange world that they're not used to. It's weird because now they're at home. They're looking for a new job in a new building, maybe a new town or state. And
all those things are difficult. Like, how do I look for a job? I have to look for a job for 20 years. So you immediately think it's going to be difficult. It's costly. It's going to be weird. And then, and this is where I got so excited, we noticed that when someone accepts a change, like when someone who's lost their job starts to move forward, it's because their mindset shifts and they start to think it could be easy, or at least doable, rewarding, and normal. So they're thinking about the change shifts from this is going to be difficult, costly, and weird to this could be easy, or at least doable and rewarding and normal. And I've worked with people who've lost jobs, and you can feel the inflection point when they start thinking, you know what, I can do this. I can do this. I can look for a job, and maybe I can find a new job that's better than my old job. That's rewarding. And okay, I guess this isn't as weird as I thought. Other people lose their job. A friend of mine lost their job. I guess I can figure this out. So when someone's mindset starts to shift in that way, then and only then do they become willing to start learning and doing the new behaviors that the change requires, and then the change can occur. So we got very excited when we saw this, because we realized then that the way that we could be most helpful to companies going through change is to help them both on the nuts and bolts side, what practically is it going to take to make this change, but almost more important on that human side, to help as many people as possible in the organization move through that mindset shift so that they can accept and adopt the change. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes a lot of sense to me. I love it that you've broken it down, because once someone does that for me, then I realize the stages I'm going through. It makes things a lot easier and much more acceptable. Erika, at this point in the show, I want to remind our listeners that they're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Erika, spelled with a K, Erika Andersen. Her book is Change from the Inside Out. Erika, we're going to ask you two questions: where we can get the book, and if there's a website where we can learn more.
Love those questions. So the book is available on Amazon and any online bookseller. And I would love if you bought it. We love to sell books and help people through our books. And the two places to go to find out more are my website, which is erikaandersen.com. Erika, as you say, spelled with a K, Andersen spelled with an E. So erikaandersen.com, or my company website, which is Proteus, Proteus-international.com.
And I'll just remind listeners, if the biggest companies in the world need Erika's help in order to make change on a business level, don't you think the rest of us might need a little help too? And if we can make that change in 3 months when it might take us 6 months or a year or longer, aren't we ahead of the curve, getting the job, meeting that new mate that much sooner, finding the new home that we're looking for? I think it's a wonderful book. It really caught my interest, and once it's explained why we fall into some of these traps, etc., it makes it so much more understandable. Now, I said to you before the show, one time I learned something in the bank, how to use the bank's app, etc., and the first day I thought, well, I can't do this, this is new, I can't do it. The next day I walked in so proud because I'm going to say in quotes, mastered it. I was able to move funds around, move them from checking, etc., and I thought I was the greatest, and the people in the bank laughed at me, and we all had a good laugh about it. But is that normal, that after we achieve a new change that we're filled with euphoria or excitement?
Yes. In fact, that's one of the, we've talked about this critical mindset shift from difficult, costly, weird to easy, rewarding, normal. One of the most rewarding things about making a change is that you've made it. Human beings love mastery. We love to be good at things, right? So to come into a change, imagine you're in an organization and you rely on a system. Let's say you're a salesperson, you rely on a CRM, a customer relationship management system, and you've used it for years and you feel good at it. And then they say, oh, we're going to change. We're going to go from Salesforce to HubSpot. I'm just making this up. And your first thing is, oh, this is going to be difficult and it's going to be costly, mostly, as you pointed out earlier, in the sense of identity. I was so good at this other one, and now I'm going to be a newbie and I'm going to look like an idiot, right? So we think it's going to be costly, and it just feels weird. But then if you can shift your mindset enough to be open to the idea that it might be easy, rewarding, and normal, and you start learning it, then there is a huge reward of being able to do a new thing. That's how we're wired. So if you can help people get over that initial hump, often the rewards that are inherent and intrinsic in doing a new thing are enough to keep them moving. So you're exactly right.
I got an A for that, A+. I got it exactly right from the expert. Boy, I feel great. This is I'm on a roll now. In your book, you use an example about doctors, and obviously we've all dealt with doctors. I think we admire them. We respect them for what they know. He or she is telling us something, helping us, maybe saving our life, our mom's life, or our child's life. Can you tell us about that example and how it applies to change?
Well, the example I use is doctors washing their hands, right? So in the 19th century, there was some really compelling data that came out about what would happen if you wash your hands. There was a doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis who did an experiment where he had doctors wash their hands with a disinfectant solution, it was lime water. And this just sounds so crazy in retrospect, doctors were going directly from doing autopsies on cadavers to working with laboring mothers who were giving birth. And many of the women died of purple fever because, the doctors brought that over from the cadavers. And he reduced, by having doctors wash their hands between autopsies and helping laboring women, he reduced from 2 in 50 to 1 in 50. From 50. He reduced it dramatically. He reduced it by 50. A huge reduction. And you'd think that doctors would see this huge reduction in mortality and immediately start washing their hands. But it took many, many years. And if you think about being a doctor, how costly is it to think, oh my gosh, I've maybe been killing my patients, right?
Oh my God, yes.
So it was difficult, but it was hugely costly to their identity. So it took a long time to make that shift. And I just use that as an example of how hard change is for us and how we really need help to make major changes, especially.
So even if something would be telling us brushing our teeth twice a day will keep us away from the dentist forever, if that was a new rule and said that, if I'm right from reading your book, there would still be a percentage of people who wouldn't brush their teeth and, no, I'm not going to do that. Won't do it.
That's exactly right. And we see this every day. We see there is a percentage of people who don't do things that we know are good for them. And that would, so what I focus on then for the rest of the book, as you know, is how do you help people move through change? And we have this 5-step change model that we use in organizations. And the core of it is helping people through that transition. How do you help people make that mindset shift? And we have some what we call change levers, things that we do to help people. But the most important thing for any of you who are leaders, any of you listeners who are leaders, whether you're leading a company or leading your family or leading a team, it's really important for you to get good at change first. It's kind of like that thing they say on airplanes, put on your own mask before attempting to help others. If you get clear about your own process of going through change and go through a change first, get to the point where you can see that a particular change could be easy and rewarding and normal, it will be much easier for you then to turn to the people that you lead and help them through the change.
So, Erika, if I'm hearing you correctly, and just to summarize for our audience, it's normal to be fearful of change. We're
Absolutely.
not oddballs, and we don't have to put up a false front or not me. I'm not afraid. No, I'll go into there. And it's scary, whether it's a dark room, a new company, yes, a new state to live in, et cetera. We're changing our environment, the people around us, something major in our life.
Yes.
And it's also normal to be fearful about that and to, I guess, try to avoid it.
Yes, and that's such an important takeaway, Bill, because a lot of times what happens in organizations is a leader will hear about the change. He or she will have weeks to kind of go through their own reactions to it and get okay with it. Then they turn to their people and they tell them about the change, and they just somehow magically expect that people are going to be fine with it. And when they're hesitant, then you're change resistant and you're negative. And no, they're humans. And if you as a leader, if the first thing you can do is just support them and just listen to them and help them through that curve, then they'll be able to, generally speaking, be okay with the change. But what you said is so important. It is an absolutely normal human reaction to be hesitant and fearful of change. So it's about helping each other through that.
I feel honestly feel so much better because, number one, I'm not a coward because I'm fearing change.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'm not necessarily an old guy, in quotes, even though I am. And because I fear change, it's normal. And it's going to be anybody, whether they're 20 or probably 80 or 90 or 100. We all have that fear of something that we don't know about. And until we overcome a hump, and then we're in pretty good shape.
And the second critical thing then to know is that we can change. I mean, it's really important, I think, when we figured out that this is a mindset shift, this is so important to know because we can change our minds. We have the power to think differently. It's a human power. So what I want to be real practical for your listeners. If you are having a change kind of imposed upon you and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be terrible. I really am worried and I'm scared and this is going to be difficult, costly, and weird. You can work on your own mindset. You can say to yourself, how can I make this easier? How can I see this as more rewarding? How can I make this more normal? You can work on shifting your own mindset so that you become more change capable. You have the power to do that.
Erika, I want to find out more about this, but I also want to let our audience know that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Erika, Erika Andersen, Andersen with an E, as she pointed out. Her book is Change from the Inside Out. And we're going to ask you, Erika, again, if you tell us where we can get the book and a website where we can learn more.
Amazon or any online bookseller. And you can learn at my website, erikaandersen.com, about the book, about my other books, about my work with my company, about my podcast. And you can also just go directly to our business website, which is Proteus, Proteus-international.com.
And remember, if the major businesses need Erika to come in and tell them how to go about this, probably most of us need it in our own lives or could do it a little better if we had some advice from an expert like Erika. So get hold of this and take a good read, see what you learn from it, and make change a little easier as you're going through the steps.
And I want to pick up on that a little bit, Bill, because one of the things that I really love about our approach to change, it is almost infinitely scopable. These 5 steps that we talk about as, how to move through change are useful if you're planning a family vacation that you're not sure your kids are going to be up for, or if you're making a big organizational transformation in a 50,000 person company. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It's useful in lots of different contexts.
You just asked my next question before I asked it. So you're even a bit psychic on this. You're scaring me now. But I was going to say that we all have it in everyday life and at school, at churches, synagogues, wherever we take part in activities, things are changing. And as you said in chapter 1, they're changing real fast, and we better keep up or we're going to fall behind.
Yes, exactly. And this, I can explain it in a minute, our 5-step process, because it's very straightforward. The first step is get clear about what the change is and why it's necessary. The second step is envision the future state. What is it going to look like when that change has been done? And you'll notice that those first 2 steps are what I said earlier, the information that people most want to know. So if the people who are instituting a change get really clear about those 3 things, what's the change? Why is it needed? What will it look like when it's done? Then as they bring more people into the tent, they can communicate that with them. And that's what happens in the 3rd step. The 3rd step we call building the change. And it's when you pull together a change team, if it's organizational, you're probably going to be doing it yourself if it's family, but you pull together the change team, share with them the clarity that you've come to. Here's the change, here's why it's needed, here's what it'll look like, and then build the actual change plan, like the project plan. What are we actually changing and how's it going to work? Then the 4th step, which almost never happens in organizations, we call lead the transition. And it's where you figure out who is going to be most affected by the change and what's going to be hard for them about it, so we can help them through that shift. So you make what we come to call a transition plan, which is actually a plan for helping people through the change. And you layer that on top of the practical change plan so that you can do them simultaneously. You can make the change while helping people through the change. And then the last step we call keep the change going. And it's just whenever you make a change, there are going to be unintended consequences. So that 5th step is stay with it so you can keep tweaking it so that it really works. And notice the ways that your organization is getting in the way of the change so you can fix those permanently so that your organization isn't a change impediment itself.
Erika, I like to learn from other people's mistakes. And since you are out in the field seeing how companies do this, and individuals, I'm sure, what are some of the most common mistakes that some of us are probably making, whether at home or in our dental office or law practice, whatever?
The single most common mistake that people make is underestimating the human side of change. They figure, especially organizations, we got a good plan, we got all the nuts and bolts, we've got everything nailed down. Oh, the human beings will get with the program. No, they will not get with the program. And there's a great statistic from McKinsey. They say that their data shows that 70% of organizational change efforts fail. 70%. And when you dig into their data, they say the two main reasons for that are lack of management support and employee buy-in. And to me, that's all human side. That just means that they haven't done that, what they need to do to help people move through change in the ways we've been talking about for the last half hour. So that's the big mistake, is just thinking that people will somehow magically get with the program and that you don't have to help them through it.
If 70% of changes fail, I want to buy stock in your company, Proteus, because that's going to be the hottest company in the world once people start listening to what you have to say and they realize the sooner they can make the change and get it going. That's a lot of money companies going to save if they can make a change in a month rather than 3 months, or if it 6 months rather than a year or 2 years.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying about, because people talk about change management. What we talk about is change acceleration. We're trying to do exactly what you say, help people go through change faster and less painfully. So if it takes 6 months of resource and human capital and effort versus a year, oh my gosh. And then that gives the company a lot of credibility. If a company can go through a big change well, then that means that the people in that company are much more likely to trust that they'll go through the next change well. So it creates that change capability that I talk about.
That's a great point. I never thought of that, but that's another great point. Erika, before we wrap up, just tell us, how has the pandemic affected these things? Is there something that we've had to change or didn't do well or could do better? The way you see the world?
I look at the pandemic as, and this is good news, bad news, but it's really just taken the lid off of change. So many things. If you think back at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sure you had a moment like I did where you went, wait, can they do that? Like when schools closed, I thought, wait, schools are closing? Can they do that? And we've all had, I think, hundreds of things the last 2 years where we've gone, can they do that? So it's sort of uncapped change, and so many more changes are happening now and will continue to happen as a result of the pandemic. I think it's even more important than it was when I started to write the book in 2019, that we become change capable, that we all get good at going through change.
That's right. That makes your business even more valuable. So I bet buy that stock quickly, and I bet it'd make my investment. Erika, thank you so much. You've really alerted us. Before we wrap up, once again, tell us where we can get the book and the website.
Amazon or any online booksellers, and erikaandersen.com or proteus-international.com.
And I'll just repeat in case someone didn't get it down, the book is Change from the Inside Out, and that's Erika with a K and Andersen with an E. Easy way to remember it. Erika, thanks so much for being with us this evening. We'd like to remind our listeners that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.